When I hear the word sequel, I tend to think of a pathetic attempt to revive a dead horse, as it were, an effort to recapture the magic and magnificence of the original that inevitably falls far short of the mark. When it comes to movies in particular, sequels always seem to dwell in the shadows of their own former glory. They're often literally a vain attempt to simply cash in financially on the success of the original, with little to no regard to continuing the story in an artistic, creative fashion. Now, there are some exceptions, of course, but in general I feel that sequels are usually substandard. Video games fare somewhat better than movies, I believe, because for one thing, the technology that powers the games is continually evolving at a rapid pace, and if game designers take advantage of the storytelling opportunities that this evolution allows, real magic can happen. Now, I'm a person, and if you're watching this, I'm presuming you're in the same group as myself, who's not easily wowed by special effects. Effects and superior graphics are fine, of course, but it's imperative that the effects be no more than a vehicle for the story and gameplay. If a game fails to immerse you forcefully into the fictional world it has created, then really what is the point? I think that the Half-Life 2 series has in general avoided the stigma of the sequel rather well. For one thing, they have in part dodged the curse simply by referring to the sequels as episodes. Instead of Half-Life 3 and Half-Life 4, we have Episode 1 and so forth. But also, the games have been released close enough to each other that each closely resembles the others, and therefore they sort of complement each other, and the later episodes do in fact seem to be the logical and intriguing progression of the storyline. I thought Episode 1 was good, we saw some new things, but as a whole it did in fact seem to be simply a continuation of Half-Life 2. Episode 2, however, seems to me to be something far different. It is more than simply the next step. There is a highly emotional quality and even a desperation within Episode 2 that was definitely not present in the previous two incarnations of Half-Life. Now, if you're anything like me, and God help you if you are, this is exactly what you wanted from the next episode. My previous two commentaries about Half-Life 2 and Episode 1 were for the most part very positive reviews, if you want to refer to them as that. I told myself that this time I was going to be far more critical about what I felt with the game's drawbacks, but as I played through Episode 2 I began to realise more and more that I was having difficulty finding faults. I hope you'll agree with me, at least in part, that Episode 2 is an astounding experience. Now, please enjoy the commentary. Have many of you people watching survived a nuclear explosion? No. I personally have not, yet I can still imagine, and my instincts tell me that it's a really, really lousy way to end the day. Now, I'm not a nuclear physicist, but I still know the basics, and to me the Citadel exploding at the end of Episode 1 looked a lot like a nuclear fusion reaction. The first thing we notice after we have regained consciousness is that our health is now down to 72. Now, being 72% healthy, to me, does not indicate that we have sustained third-degree burns over most of our bodies, so perhaps I was wrong about the nuclear explosion. But on the other hand, our HEV suit has lost all of its charge, which does suggest to me a massive electromagnetic pulse, which would be consistent with a nuclear explosion. It's so hard to tell. Regardless of the reason, we have managed to survive a massive disaster. The train from which we escaped City 17 has plunged off of a cliff, leaving us stumbling down the twisted passageway, navigating our way between luggage and cans of Dr. Breen's private reserve. Dr. Breen may be long gone, but he will live on forever through his canned drink. Not only has Alex also survived the crash, but she appears to be in perfect condition, despite the fact she must have been thrown completely clear of the plummeting train. Alex really is as nimble as a Thompson's gazelle. During the crash we lost all of our weapons. Now, logic tells us that the complete arsenal must be very close by, but progressive gameplay would suggest otherwise. The gravity gun, thank goodness, is also near at hand and has also remained intact. I find it hard to believe that the Resistance science team would not endeavour to make more zero-point energy field manipulators to use against the Combine, as the power, reliability and value of this device have been absolutely decisive in humanity's struggle. I cannot imagine anything more valuable than the gravity gun, except perhaps some kind of handheld device that creates two linked portals through which a person or object can travel. One of the first things I notice about Alex, apart from her being unharmed, is the breadth of her body language and facial expressions. Her face conveys a lot throughout the game, especially her eyes. I do not know if there were improvements in characters' animations between episodes 1 and 2, but it seems so to me, and I think it's a job very well done.
Maybe they're still around. We've got a long way to go to find my dad. It'd be nice to have some extra help.
This first view of the ruins of City 17 and the Citadel is quite breathtaking. As always, I like blue things, and the portal is really lovely. One thing that I cannot help but notice, however, is that as we were leaving City 17 on the train at the end of Episode 1, we were at ground level with the city itself, even at the point of the explosion, and now we are in the foothills of mountains. Also, the train tracks were leading directly away from the Citadel, and the tracks above us on the bridge are now perpendicular to the Citadel. I know, these are insignificant details, but my mind has difficulty overcoming them. The portal storm, as Alex calls it, is a very impressive and ambitious animation, with its expanding shockwave and display of aurora-like blue lights. Equally impressive is the collapse of the train bridge behind us. I know this is a scripted sequence, but it is really breathtaking and highly detailed. I have never spoken in these commentaries about the technical aspects of the games, as this sort of thing is already covered in enormous length all over the internet. I have what I consider to be only a moderately high-end PC, yet Episode 2 performs better on my computer than Episode 1. I'm very impressed by this fact. I have my graphics options set all the way up, except for the texture quality, which is only on medium for the sake of these recordings. In fact, here are my computer's specifications, since I'm sure you're extremely interested. I bring this up only because I know that the collapse of the bridge is probably very taxing graphics-wise, yet even my computer, performs this sequence admirably. We quickly head into an open mine with Alex. Now, part of me wants to say that the zombies are getting old, and perhaps their presence in the Half-Life world should be reconsidered, but a much larger and louder part of me thinks that the zombies are fantastic and would be dearly missed if they were gone. It's not at all surprising to me that these forsaken creatures are the first enemies we encounter. If my calculations are correct, 75% of humans in the post-Combine world are now zombies. They're as ubiquitous as Gordon's crowbar, and are now so intimately intertwined with the Half-Life universe that they could not possibly be removed. Their groaning utterances and shuffling movements are an unceasing source of entertainment. And as I had hoped, we do have a new addition to the zombie family in Episode 2. This is the fast zombie torso. This creature is not especially dangerous, but what it lacks in excitement it more than makes up for in hilarity. And look at him go. I think I'd like one of these for a pet. This first meeting of the zombies also involves one of my favourite spectator sports, and that is zombies fighting antlions. The zombies, as usual, always come out on top. Given that we only have the gravity gun as a weapon, I was very pleased to see a new explosive device, the propane tank. As I began to proceed in the game, I felt for certain that one of the first things I would see would be one of the old red and white striped explosive barrels. Not that those barrels are without merit, mind you. In fact, they played a pivotal role in Ravenholm and City 17. But ask yourself this: how many times in real life have you seen a barrel full of explosive material? And now, how many times have you seen a tank of propane? Gordon and Alex find a building with a communication monitor inside, but the power is out. Fortunately, Alex looses one of those huge blue plugs that are so common in Half-Life 2. Now, I think nothing provides greater evidence that we are somewhere in Eastern Europe than the presence of these weird-looking plugs and electrical outlets.
But it worked.
Have you ever tried to plug your notebook into a Hungarian electrical socket? My advice is to not do it. We turn the power back on, and we are finally able to contact the White Forest base, where Eli and Dr. Kleiner are greeted with the joyful news that we and Alex are still alive and have escaped City 17 unscathed. It's great to see these two characters again. Dr. Kleiner cheerful, upbeat, and obsessed with his work, and Eli thoughtful, compassionate, and concerned about our well-being. We learn that the destruction of the Citadel did not completely cut off the Combine from this world after all, and in fact the resulting portal that we saw earlier is the beginning of an enormous rift that will allow untold numbers of Combine forces to descend upon the hapless Earth. This important news sort of sets the stage for the rest of the game, for we will now proceed forward with the ultimate goal of neutralizing this burgeoning portal. While speaking to Eli and Dr. Kleiner, we meet a new character, Dr. Magnuson. I don't necessarily like Dr. Magnuson. He's rather abrupt, ill-mannered, and arrogant, yet he does seem to know what he's talking about. However, as a character in the game, I like Dr. Magnuson a great deal, as he's not the stereotypical geeky scientist with goggle glasses and a pocket protector. Dr. Magnuson seems to me more real than many other characters by virtue of being a jerk, because in real life we all know someone exactly like him. I should really say something, I suppose, about this this garden gnome that we find under the bench. Now, I like garden gnomes to the extent that I think it is quaint and amusing to actually see them in a garden smoking a pipe with a slug crawling across their face. I don't care for this garden gnome in episode 2 for a very specific reason. Garden gnomes have garnered a place in popular culture following one's appearance in the movie Amelie. The protagonist in the movie steals her father's garden gnome and flies it around the world, mailing photographs back to him. This led to real-life gnomes being the subject of pranks and abductions. They've now even appeared in several television commercials. As a result of gnomes' popularity in the media, the appearance of one in episode 2 does not seem to me to be unique. What really would have delighted me would have been to find in the same place, say, a framed photograph of Margaret Thatcher or the head of Jimmy Hoffa in a jar. Now those things would have been unexpected. Now I know, I'm just splitting hairs. I also know that it's one of the achievements to carry this chap all the way to White Forest and place him in the rocket, but there's no way I'm risking my life to carry this creature to the end of the game. Frankly, he's a liability, and also there's no way to prevent him from falling out of the car. But as much as I was not surprised by the gnome, the next event was completely unexpected. In episode 1 we caught a brief glimpse of a hunter on the broadcast from Judith Mossman, but in episode 2 they quickly steal the stage as one of the most profoundly important characters in the game. The Combine Hunter is a marvelous creature, as you no doubt agree. Now, as hunters are the premier creature for episode 2, it is difficult for me to choose what to say about it that you have not already found out, played, or read, so I'll just give you my own impressions of this extraordinary being. I love the iridescent colouring of the hunter and its organic shape, which is a smooth blend of machine and animal. Its constantly scanning, vertically aligned eyes express a certain amount of, I guess, emotion, through nothing more than their positioning and the aperture of each eye's iris, as do the creature's whistling and whooping calls. The ambulation and animation of the hunter is simply superb, and its ability to negotiate narrow passageways, even those indoors, make us an extremely formidable foe. The very first hunter we encounter makes the biggest impression. This monster knocks Alex to the ground and quickly pierces her through the upper abdomen with both of its... well, I tend to want to refer to those as its mouth parts. The scene is extremely shocking, even a little bit upsetting, as the wounds that Alex receives are obviously very severe, and we are pinned helplessly beneath the floor of the shed. The first time I saw this I was quite stunned, which I think is probably exactly the intent that was being sought.